By the way, I'm loving all the $1 million vocabulary words you're dropping today. This is like some good
Yeah.
science stuff.
This it's, yeah, my professor self was taking over here. Hello, and welcome to Winging It with Frank and Sammy. I am Sammy, and this is my co-host, Frank. Frank, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's nesting season. It's a good time for everybody.
It is nesting season, and that is going to be the topic of our podcast today. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about different mating strategies and courtship behaviors birds have. And so then we're going to kind of go to the natural result of that is nest building and raising young. We'll talk about different strategies that birds employ, different types of nests, and different types of parental care. So that's kind of our rough outline for today. Frank, is there anywhere you want to start off first?
I usually like to reinforce how important this is to a bird. Like we talked about the courtship, mating, and basically the purpose of life for birds is to reproduce, right? It's to have offspring, spread your DNA, get out there and continue the species existence. So the first half of that was what we talked about last time, finding a mate that's suitable, doing the deed. And then this is like the real crux of it, right? Because you have to make them survive. You have to get them to the point to where they can reproduce. And all of the different strategies and ways the birds are going to try and do this, it's as varied as the courtship displays, I think. And I'm really excited to talk about that. So which one do we want to start with? Should we start with cavity nesters since you've got that box we were just talking about? I think that's a good, fun one.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. So the box Frank is referring to is I have a oak titmouse nest box just outside the house that they have started moving into and excavating. They are cavity nesters, which, yeah, just to define our terms here, a cavity nester nests inside a tree cavity. Doesn't necessarily have to be a tree. It could be a nest box, could be a rotted piece of I don't know, the rotted side of a building. Could be, I've seen starlings nesting in like traffic light poles. Have you ever, I don't
Oh
know if
yeah.
you've ever seen that.
Yep. Yep. Anywhere and everywhere.
Essentially, yeah, essentially some sort of cavity hole that either they excavate themselves in the case of woodpeckers. And I guess if you want to consider like kingfishers, cavity nesters, they nest in burrows like in the side of riverbanks. So they dig that out if you want to count that as a
Right.
cavity. Or we would say that they are secondary cavity nesters, basically meaning they rely on either natural form cavities or other animals like woodpeckers to make a cavity for them. So these would be things like bluebirds, wrens, titmice and chickadees to some extent. So that's kind of when we talk about cavity nesters, that's what we mean. And there's kind of two subcategories in there. And this is actually a category that's near and dear to my heart because I actually got my master's studying two species of woodpeckers, white-headed and blackback woodpeckers. So that was really interesting to watch because I had essentially cameras on their nests and I would watch what happened to them and kind of record, when they visited a nest. Really, I was more interested in if any predators came to the nest. And so I was kind of recording those interactions. But one thing was interesting to see was how many nests actually got reused in that same season by other birds. I think it was like something like 40% of the nests within the same season got reused by wrens or bluebirds. And actually, in one case, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Frank, but I had video of woodpeckers building a nest, and there was a couple bluebirds hanging out, and they just were like waiting for the woodpeckers to finish their nest. And as soon as they finished, the bluebirds basically just harassed them and drove off the woodpeckers and took over the nest.
Oh my gosh, it's like waiting for your contractor to finish your house. Like, okay, get out, you're done.
Yeah, well, no, it's like not waiting for not even that. It's like waiting for your contractor to finish their own house, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna take this over. And he's like, and the woodpecker's like, okay, I guess we can build another one.
I I am surprised that bluebirds are tenacious enough to drive off woodpeckers. I would think the woodpeckers would be more aggressive and would drive the bluebirds off. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, they are pretty tenacious, and I think another part of that is they're just a little more agile and mobile. So, like, the woodpeckers would be on the nest or just kind of right outside the cavity, and the woodpeckers would just dive bomb them. And eventually, the woodpeckers just got tired of it and they left. They said, "Okay, we can move."
Wow, that's that's pretty cool. I mean, there's no rule in saying how long a secondary cavity nester has to wait to use the cavity nest, right? So it could just 5 seconds is good enough. Just get out.
Yeah, and I think that kinda
Um,
speaks to the pros and cons of cavity nests. If you are a primary cavity excavator, you make the nest like woodpeckers. That obviously requires a lot of energy for you to put in to build and,
uh,
hammer away. And typically, there's not just gonna be like any tree. It has to they usually like dead trees that have kind of, they're strong enough on the outside, but then the heartwood on the inside maybe is a bit rotted or easy enough to dig out. So you have to go around and look for a good nest site, and that takes some time, and then excavate. And sometimes woodpeckers they will excavate and they'll get into that heartwood and realize, this isn't like what we're looking for, and so they'll have to go start again. So it does take effort. And then for the secondary cavity nesters, that obviously limits you because if you're just kind of depending on either natural cavities to form or other animals to form cavities for you, or in this case, the titmice for people to put up boxes, then that's a little bit out of your control. So that's kind of some of the downsides, but the plus sides, they offer a lot more protection from predation than just a nest that's out in the open.
that's true. The success rates for cavity nesters are higher than for nesters that don't use cavities. So there is definitely survivability inherent in having that protection. I think another thing to keep in mind for the primary is that they need to have special tools in order to be able to create those holes, right? An oak
Mhm.
titmouse can have all the drive at once, but it is not going to make a hole in a tree out there very easily, right? You need to have the ability to cling onto that tree to drill the hole. You need the beak to drill it, and not every bird could do that. So it's funny that there's this whole subset of birds that are just like, we're going to use the holes that other birds make and just steal them whenever we need to. And that's their survival strategy. So kind of interesting. While we're talking cavity nesters, my favorite cavity nester, it's got to be the quetzal. You have a picture, right? From
Yeah.
Costa Rica. You got to put that picture up where they just have the tail hanging out of that like
I
that.
will
It's
put
like,
that up, yeah.
I love that. It's like, this is not a bird you would expect to live in a hole in a tree. Like, it doesn't, physically, it doesn't work, right? It's got this tiny little beak. And we saw them shoveling out the little wood chips and stuff. But yeah, it's just the resplendent quetzal picture will be here, but very long tail, tiny head, tiny bill, nests in cavities. Blew my mind. I kind of didn't believe it until I saw it, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that I think woodpeckers are kind of your classic, but there's a lot of other birds that nest in hollowed out cavities. I mean, barn owls are kind of
Mhm.
in that category. I mean, they'll readily use nest boxes. So even
Yeah.
a large species can still, use a tree. And obviously, the larger you are, maybe the more difficult it is to find a good suitable tree. But when we were in Belize, Jonathan, our guide, told us about the yellow-hatted Amazons, how they were cavity nesters, and as part of the conservation recovery, they put nest boxes around the trees because there weren't enough pine trees of a large enough size for natural cavities to be formed or made. And yeah, then it
Yeah.
obviously had quetzal. The quetzal's kind of like you said, meant not a bird you think would be a cavity nester. It's not like woodpeckers. Like this is a question I would get asked all the time. Like how do woodpeckers make? How do they slam your head into a tree and not kill yourself? So like you mentioned, they're specialized. Obviously, they have that chisel of a beak, but then they have a lot of spongy kind of bone in their head to absorb the blow, and then their tongue actually wraps around the back of their skull, acting as another cushion. And then, if you've ever seen woodpecker feathers, or if you see a picture of them on a tree, their back two feathers are really stiff, so they actually can kind of lean back. And then their
Mhm.
feet are designed to be they're called zygodactyl, basically means they have 2 feet in front, 2 feet in back, so they can really cling onto or 2 I should say 2 toes. front and
Two
back.
toes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
That would
four-footed
be
woodpecker.
intense.
Wow.
So, yeah, so there's all different kinds of birds that can nest in cavities, and the reason, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, that is your nesting success is gonna be higher, maybe harder to find. Usually, cavities are gonna be up higher in trees, so it's harder for predators to get in there. It's a little easier to defend, right? You just have kind of one point of entry. Even I remember in Utah, I put out a nest box, and we had some red-breasted nuthatches nest in there, and they'll actually put sap around the edge of the entrance hole to prevent
Yeah.
different like insects or maybe even snakes from coming in. So that's kind of the pro and con of cavity nesters.
It's very clever. I like the sap trick. I like when the birds are looking for these cavities to use, they're very specific about what they want, right? The hole has to be the right size, the space inside has to be the right size. So there's a lot of experience that goes in for the birds that have done it before and they tend to do better. The first timers tend to pick terrible locations and usually the nests fail, but that's how it goes in nature sometimes. Is there anything else for cavity nesting?
No, I think that just points to the fact that as more we humans develop things, that can potentially take away those cavity sites, particularly with logging. And this is something the Forest Service has worked on, making sure to leave enough dead trees because dead trees are a great place for cavities to form or for woodpeckers to make cavities. So, but if
Yeah,
you're in an area where you have cavity nesters, putting up nest boxes, a lot of them will readily use them. We were just at the settling ponds the other week, right? We had all the tree swallows there. There's not really
um,
there's not a ton of cavities around there. I've seen them in the trees before, but they
me
love the
too. Yeah,
boxes.
they do. We got to get those back up. That's the name too, right? Tree swallow. I love the name when they see them peeking out of a tree. It's like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, now I understand. So I guess then another nest type we can move to would be sort of the opposite of ground nesters. So these are typically going to be more of your game birds or waterfowl. So things like ducks, geese,
Mhm.
your prairie
Quail.
chickens, quail, yeah, turkeys. And what's interesting with them is that, so there's a totally different strategy, right? Instead of being protected in a nesting cavity, they're almost completely exposed. So they have to take some different tactics. One of them being they're super well camouflaged. So at Ventura, right, we have the snowy plovers in their nests. And if anyone's ever been to Ventura or anywhere in SoCal and seen a snowy plover nest, you'll see they're extremely hard to find. But the the eggs, I remember like being at the Santa Clara River estuary and I, just saw a couple nests and I was like looking for eggs. It's like I saw the parent like sitting on them and I could not find the eggs. And then finally I found them. Like, oh my gosh, they just look like sand.
Yeah, they're very well hidden. The eggs and then the chicks as well come out kind of camouflage. They look like sandy brown little chicks.
Yeah, so
Oh,
and with things like shorebirds and ducks, we use the term precocial. Basically means the young are born feathered, fully feathered. Well, not like feathered as an adult; they have down, but they're alert, they're awake, and they're ready to rock and roll pretty much right
yeah,
away.
they hatch and run away.
Compared to like your cavity nesters or your songbirds, we have what we call altricial young, which basically means they're blind and naked. So if you see a baby songbird, right, they have no feathers, their eyes are still closed, they're just little pink pieces of meat, essentially.
Yeah. So yeah, this kind of gets to a whole different strategy here, where you have the birds that nest on the ground versus the birds that nest at elevation. Because if you're up, typically you're going to need to be able to fly to get out of there alive, right? So they have to wait, they have to develop, and it takes a lot longer. Whereas the ones that are going to be on the ground, they hatch and they need to run, like literally killdeer. As soon as they're up, they're just like cotton balls on sticks and they're going. And it's like, yeah, you're on the ground, you're exposed. You are basically one of a dozen or two young that just hatched, and your chances are 50-50. You have to avoid the predators. I like what the killdeer does to kind of boosts the effort, right? Because they just lay their eggs right on the ground, right on a flat surface. They
Mhm,
don't care. And the babies hatch and they run. But if you get near a killdeer nest, the
mhm.
parent tries to distract you, right? The broken wing display, they make a lot of noise. So that's kind of how they're compensating a little bit for the lack of protection. It's just like, where do you want to put your energy as a parent? Like, is it in raising the bird so it's able to fledge? Is it in defending the nest physically or distracting? Do you want to lay 100 eggs on the ground and hope that 10 survive? Or do you want to lay one egg on top of a tree and guard it for 2 years? It's kind of like our options are possible. You just to pick where you're going to allocate your skill points, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that way to phrase it. Allocate your skill points, because yeah, everything is a trade off. So typically, with your ground nesting birds, they may have more of them. So if you see a group of mallards, and the hen with her chicks, this is not uncommon. You see her; she starts out like with 12 chicks. You come back a week later, it's down to like six
Mhm.
already.
Yeah. It's a numbers game.
It is a numbers game. And I think that is also a good pivot to talk about things like herons or even eagles. So herons nest, and and honestly, to me, Frank, like I don't think herons should nest in trees. Not I'm saying that I'm a better
No.
heron that they are, but it's just like this big, gangly bird like flies up into the tree. Like
Yeah.
what?
It's almost always a crash landing too. It's just like they squawk and their feet and wings are going everywhere, and it's like that's not graceful. Maybe get lower. I don't know. Somewhere safer. And palm trees.
Yeah, and palm trees and wherever, like, I've seen them in ukes, right? And they nest together in what we call rookeries. So you have a big group of herons all nesting together, and they engage in an interesting strategy. They typically will only raise one chick, maybe
Yeah.
two, but they will lay an extra egg. So it's kind of almost like an insurance policy.
Is it similar to with the eagles where they will not feed all of the offspring and they just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
let the strongest one win out and take care of that one? Yeah. Sad.
It's dark. Yeah, so herons, eagles, they will engage in sibling side essentially, where there will be one chick that hatches first that is essentially bigger and just dominates the other chick. And
Yeah.
in years where there's maybe plentiful food, or maybe in cases where yeah, that first chick dies or has some problems with it, then the parents have a backup egg. Or, if they get a bonus egg, if it's like, well, we got a lot of food, so we can feed both of them. But
Yeah.
most of the time, the older chick is going to win out. It'll either kick its younger one out the nest, like physically push it out the nest, or just kill it. And there's some pretty like dark videos of, this happening right underneath the parents, like literally right under their nose. And they're just like, yeah, okay, this is
Yeah.
what.
That's it's one of those things where as much as we like anthropomorphize birds and then we see these things happen, it's like, why isn't it doing anything? It's like, well, they're birds, they're not humans. They're not thinking like, oh no, that one offspring is doing a bad thing. It doesn't click like that. I was gonna say, I saw a nest in Pennsylvania and visited it several times, maybe like 15 years ago, where it was a bald eagle nest, just a huge, huge nest, and they successfully fledged 4 offspring. And it was like it
Whoa.
made the local news, the people out there taking pictures. They actually fed 4 offspring, which was like the first time it had happened in decades or something out there. It was pretty cool. So that was a
That's
good year.
wild. Yeah, that's a really good year. That's maybe a fun thing to point out about bald eagle nests. They can weigh almost a ton because they will just keep adding to their nest.
Yeah.
It just becomes a giant mound of sticks, like 9 feet
Yep.
across.
Yeah, when you see all the pre-fledglings bouncing around, stretching their wings, you need all that space. Otherwise, they would accidentally knock each other out of the nest. Big birds.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, like you mentioned earlier, typically a larger bird are typically going to have fewer offspring. Smaller birds are going to have more offspring. This is sort of just a kind of general, I don't want to say rule, but just a pattern in life. right? I mean, you think the same
And
thing with mammals, small mice, I just boom, 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 crank them out, whereas an
yeah,
elephant is like pregnant for 2 years.
yeah, yeah. I think it's tends to be a lot of things lower on the food chain seem to have a lot of offspring just to offset the fact that they're getting hunted, and then the prey ones tend to be fewer, and there's more time spent with the young, teaching them all the different things they need to know to be effective.
And also that's just a rule of energy in the sense that, like, there's always gonna
Mhm.
be more things at the bottom of the food chain because they get more energy from plants. Every time you go up the trophic level, you're losing energy, so you're gonna have more mice than you will have hawks because the mice are eating the grass directly.
Right. All right, cool. So we got ground nesters. I guess we could talk about some of the standard nests. I mean, the bulk of the birds build cup nests of some sort, usually in bushes or trees or somewhere with protection. And that's like the majority of the birds. But there are a couple that are pretty cool. I have always been a big fan of bush tit nests because you've got
Mhm.
these tiny, tiny little birds and they build like a foot long, what looks like a really kind of janky wool sock. And it's just like, it's so much effort. I love it. It's just, and it's so camouflaged. They're actually kind of hard to find sometimes. So those are some of my favorite. And desert orioles too, of course. The weavers are always great. What about you? Do you have any favorite non-cavity nesting styles or birds?
I really like hummingbird nests, just because they
Good one.
seem to nest, like, anywhere. Like, I remember I had a friend growing up, they had a hummingbird build a nest in the wreath on their front door.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. The things they can do with spider web is pretty amazing. They could stick it just about anywhere. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing I like about them too. So the hummingbirds, they have to build their nest to be able to expand as the chicks grow. And so because of things like spider silk, their nest will actually grow and get bigger as the chicks fill it out. So I think that's pretty cool. You have an expandable nest.
Yeah, yeah. And because they're very good conservationists, the female will actually break the nest down and reuse the materials if she has to go rebuild another nest to do it all over again. So I've had times where I watched a nest get built, saw the eggs, saw the young. One day they were there flapping on the nests. The next day they were on the branches. Day after that, everything was gone. The young were gone. The nest was gone. It was just like, wow, that was quick. They do not waste time.
Yeah, gotta get to round 2. And I think that's another interesting thing as well is that some birds will make multiple we call clutches per year. So that typically is gonna happen more where it's warmer, obviously. When I actually was studying in my PhD program for a hot second there before I left, my lab was part of this group where my advisor, she studied the differences in nesting behaviors between juncos in LA and juncos in the mountains. And the juncos in LA had like 3, up maybe even 4 clutches per year, whereas the juncos in the mountains only had 1 just because the nesting season was so much shorter.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I remember we were in Belize or Costa Rica where you get to the tropics, these ideas like here in the northern hemisphere, we think of spring as nesting time, right? In the tropics, that's kind of just that's not really the rules don't really apply
Yeah,
or work the same way.
yeah.
There isn't really a spring.
The first time I was in Costa Rica, and I was just mind blown the whole time. And I remember asking the guide, I was like, "So what's nesting season here?" And he just kind of looked at me, and he's like, "We don't really have one. It's just all year." And I was like, "Really? Like all the time? Just like rainy season, dry season, they're just going?" He's like, "Yeah, you can find nests all year round." It's like, wow, that's kind of cool. So you don't think about that. Here, we're used to like, I say here, like Southern California gets a lot of big seasonal changes, but in North America, you get blizzards and there's nobody nesting in the blizzard, right? Maybe some raptors or something, but you just can't physically. A lot of the songbirds just can't nest outside of that 3 or 4 month period. So they're kind of limited. Why do they even migrate at all? There's a teaser for another episode.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good teaser for maybe an episode in a month or so as we
It's
as
coming up.
spring. starts to turn the corner. Okay,
It's
so our last topic here. So we talked about cavity nesters, ground nesters, your kind of traditional cup nesters. But then we're going to have the birds that don't nest at all. Instead, they just dump their children off to somebody else.
it saves a lot of time, saves a lot of energy.
Yeah, so cowbirds and cuckoos and some other birds as well, are what we call nest parasites. So they will watch their host, and like cowbirds, they love to like target yellow warblers, for example. When I was in
Yeah.
Michigan, I did a course in Michigan, and that's where the Kirtland's warbler there is. And so they were actually trapping cowbirds in order to help protect the Kirtland's warbler since it was so endangered.
Mm.
Because when the cowbird nests in the nest, the cowbird egg, I believe, hatches first. And then as it hatches, it just starts kicking out the other eggs.
Yeah, they get so big so fast, and the hosts are usually smaller birds, and the young cowbird is just like overpowering, gets all the food, and just eventually the host tends to not make it.
Yeah, I feel like the theme of these past two episodes has just been it's pretty cutthroat in the bird
It's
world.
yeah, it's a we're giving you a real look here at what it's like to be a bird. It's not easy. It looks all like singing in colors and being a bird and flying, and it's like it's challenging, we'll say.
I just imagine like playing like, hey, I'm gonna have a baby, but I'm not gonna take care of it. You are gonna take care of it. And I'm gonna try like I know you don't want to, but I'm just gonna try to trick you into doing it.
Right? It's like when you're having your baby, I'm gonna throw mine in there too, and you're just not gonna tell that you have more than you expected because you can't count, I guess.
Yeah, and then my baby is gonna grow bigger and basically just beat up on all the other babies.
Yeah. Here's raise my bully child.
I think it's like the funniest thing. You see this cow because when they fledge, they're like 3 times bigger than like the warblers, and so you see this,
Yeah.
massive cowbird like begging, and this tiny warbler like feeding it. I'm like this poor warbler.
Yeah, right. It's exhausting. I mean, I have towards the end of nesting season, I love to see the yellow warblers just before like fall migration. And they nest at the ponds. I've seen them feeding the young. I saw feeding a cowbird once. And the parents at the end of the nesting season look so worn out. Like literally their feathers are worn out. They look like they've been
Sure.
beat up for a couple of months. Like this entire process is exhausting for the parents. Like from the courtship to the building the nest to the laying the eggs, feeding the babies, helping them fledge, defending everything the whole time. It is a tremendous energy output. But it's also the goal of your life. It's the purpose of your life. So you basically everything you can do goes into that for that period of time. And then you get this little window between nesting being done and fall migration where they just like eat everything in sight, get all new feathers and get the heck out of town and they go have like a nice winter vacation down south somewhere. That's their reward. If they survive the trip down south, I guess.
Yeah, it's a wild world out there. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this kind of preview. Again, there's all sorts of nesting strategies and weird things. There's birds that build giant mounds of dirt and they throw their eggs in there and let
Mhm.
them like the decomposing organic matter just heats the eggs and warms them up. So there's actually a good book. I'll put it in the show notes. It's a Sibley book of like nests of the bird world.
Yeah, I have that book too. It's I don't think it's a Sibley though. I think the guy who wrote it was actually came to the Western Foundation and did like a special thing because my copy is signed and it's not Sibley. I don't know
Oh,
where it is in
okay.
it, but it's like Nests of the World or something like that. It's just a big book of all bird nests. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I'll find the actual name and put that in the show notes. But anything
Nice.
else, Frank, before we wrap up here?
I don't think so. I mean, March, I'm going to do another bird talk, probably about nesting. Don't have the date yet, but I'll post it in the Facebook group. I'll probably lead a bird walk at some point in March as well for anybody who's local. There's a dinner and auction for local Caneo Valley Audubon people, but March 14th. Go to the website. Come support us. Sammy and I will be there. Live performance.
Yes, well, if you are in the Thousand Oaks area on Saturday, March 14th, you want to stop by and support Conejo Valley Audubon, we would be honored to have you. It's a great time, good food. There's silent auctions, a live auction. But assuming we don't see you at the auction, hopefully we will virtually connect with you on our next podcast episode. Well, maybe we'll talk about an overview of spring migration. We'll see. We'll see.
That'd be fun.
But until then, take care, everyone. Go see some birds, enjoy your birding, and we'll see you in the next one.